Right, good afternoon, everybody. It's Litsock, it's Thursday, and we are back round our familiar table. So have yourselves biscuits and tea, I'm sure you have. The custard creams are on the table. Are there other ones available? Other biscuits are available. Good. Okay. As we all know, we are in a period of mourning for our beloved Queen Elizabeth II. Some people might have met her, some parents might have met her, or grandparents. I've never had that privilege, but I think she meant a lot to all of us. So today we are going to mark this sort of interim period as we're waiting for the funeral on Monday, when we have a bank holiday and we won't be in school. We're going to mark the occasion with looking at kings and queens in literature. I'm sure if you sort of think very briefly, you'll probably think of one queen or king just off the top of your head. I was in my hall this morning thinking, have I got things I could take in or get off the shelf? And I was thinking about Alice in Wonderland, Alice Through the Looking Glass, which there are queens and kings in that, based on the playing cards. There are books about real kings and queens who've lived quite close to us. Who am I talking about?
The Tudors.
The Tudors, absolutely, yes. We've got on the table, we've got a selection of books to do with mythical and real people. If I say Wolf Hall and Hilary Mantel, has anybody heard of these? Yeah, Lulu? Yeah, Juno, have you read them?
Both my parents have read them.
You read them. Did you see the series with them?
No.
No? Okay. Hilary Mantel has completed her work now on Thomas Cromwell, and Henry VIII, but of course queens and kings in that. We've got Arthur. We've got, what else have we got? Elizabeth I, and a young person called Lucy, who works with Dr. Dee. So even just a random pulling off the shelf, there are things here, aren't there? However, I want to just go very quickly back to last week, because we didn't hear from Miss Rio as to what she read on her holidays. So, Miss Rio, can we start with you? Would that be all right? As we do I do my peripatetic swapping around.
All right. This is the only one I still have on me. This is The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper.
Anybody else read it?
Probably not. It's definitely not as appropriate for a younger age group as I thought it was.
Oh, okay.
But it's about a group of women who are living as slaves in Pompeii, sort of 40 years before, the eruption happens. So it's just about what it means to be a woman and living in Roman society. So it was quite interesting. Yeah. It was a little bit longer than I think it should have been. Some books kind of, you get to page 300 and you're like, what else can they do? Yeah. But if she, I think this is going to be part of a trilogy, but if this author, Elodie Harper, writes anything else about, Roman era, I'd pick it up. Not this one, unless you're a little bit older.
Is it set in Rome itself?
In Pompeii.
In Pompeii?
Pompeii, yeah. 79 AD, I think it is.
So it's the year of the eruption now.
Is it? Is that the year? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought it was a little bit before, but yeah, I think it's about that time. I might be wrong. But yeah, it's centred a lot around female characters, and it's all about female friendship and kind of coming together in difficult circumstances. So it was good. It's a good one.
Who else has read anything about Pompeii?
Well, yeah.
Well,
No? Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, Robert Harris, for instance.
I'm in Latin
Oh.
in Latin we're reading the book.
You're reading about Caecilius?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all the time in Pompeii. But we're reading to the end of the first book, so we haven't really got to the big story.
Okay. Yeah.
Pompeii's great. I find it so fascinating to read about Pompeii. If you don't know much about it, definitely look it up. Just even the pictures of what it looks like now, because it's so kind of preserved from exactly how it looked like. It's it's
incredible.
really fascinating.
Classic strips,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I read that one. I also read the Twyford Code.
Yeah.
Which one's that?
My
James
mum
Hallett?
read that.
Yeah.
So
Have you
did
read
I,
it?
Yeah.
It was good. I liked it a lot. I went to see her talk in Chiswick, and I hadn't read the book, so I was like, I'll pick it up before. But I read it in about 2 days, right before I went to see her, because it's kind of one of those books, isn't it, where you just go right through it. But I was up really late because the last few pages kind of change your experience with the whole rest of the book. It's a kind of murder mystery type thing. And so then you felt like those last few pages, you had to keep going back to other pages and rereading. And then, so if you like a good kind of twisty-turny mystery, I need to read The Appeal next. I haven't read that one yet.
I prefer The Appeal.
Really? Okay. Yeah, I do need to read it. Yeah. And I read another one. This was just a bit before summer. It was a Japanese translation book called Scattered All Over the Earth. And it's kind of a dystopia. And it's set in the near-distant future where rising sea levels have basically destroyed Japan. And nobody really remembers it anymore. That was a long time ago. And the language has completely died out. And there's one Japanese woman who remembers the language, and she basically goes on a quest around the country to find other people who still remember the language. Sounds better than it was.
Right.
Oh, okay.
There was about 7 characters, and it was all from their point of views.
Right.
So it was all a little bit. Every chapter, I kind of didn't know where I was, but the idea of kind of how much a language defines the culture of a place was quite an interesting thing to think about.
That is interesting.
Because and she spoke a lot about words that have same and different meanings in different countries with the same word or similar words, and then it was interesting. If you're interested in language, I think it's one to pick up. But yeah, that was what I read.
Nice and
Thank you
varied.
very much.
Just-
Yeah. Great.
Diverse.
So is Miss Rigo now going to talk to us about
Yeah,
if she
shall
has
I-
one in mind?
I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, it's under the chair. I'll go first while I'm already here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Miss
Yeah.
Hanley approves.
Way.
Philippa Gregory is the one. Is what I went for. She is quite a prolific writer now, I'd say, of sort of Tudor England, and she did this big series, which was about the War of the Roses. And this is the one I picked up because it's the one I remember the most. It's about Henry VIII's grandmother, so Henry VII's mother. And she is a very interesting character. She's very, very religious. And do you know much about the War of the Roses?
A little bit.
A little bit. So basically you had the two sides of England. It was a bit of a, not quite a civil war, but it was sort of
I would
a
say
trick.
it was
It kind
really.
of was. It just isn't called that.
No, because of the one that
Yeah.
came 100 years later.
It didn't affect an awful lot of people, but
No.
No, true. Not in the way that
Not-
the English Civil War did.
no,
Yeah.
as Josephine Tay says, it's you might have your kitchen might be used as a dressing station, and everybody moves on.
Yeah, yeah.
Today, having eaten you out of house and home. But,
Yeah.
But yes,
Not
it's
quite as-
chaotic,
Yeah. So you had two different families who were both vying to be the royals, basically, and you had this woman who thought her son, Henry VII, the Tudor family, should have been king, and then you had the Lancasters?
Yeah, House of Lancaster.
Lancaster, yeah, and they were both vying for the crown, and that is where you get the Tudor rose, which is the white and red combination rose. But before that happened, you had one house was the red rose, one house was the white rose, and that's what her series is about. It's very interesting. It's a lot about the women in that situation, the mothers and the sisters and the wives and things like that. So if you're interested in English history and the stories of the women who got caught up in that.
That's what she
She's
specialises
somewhat-
in, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this woman, for example, Henry VIII's grandmother, what's her name? I can't remember. Margaret Beaufort.
Yeah,
That's it. She, I knew very little about her before, but this book was really interesting because it's completely from her point of view. And she used to sign her letters as, future Queen Mother and things like that because she was so certain that that was what was going to happen. And it did. It ended up happening. But she's a really fascinating person. So, yeah. Philippa Gregory. My recommendation. Who wants to go next?
Anybody volunteering to go next?
Can you go?
Yes,
Yeah.
Marianne.
So I have a book called Cinderella is Dead. It's a very good book. I really enjoyed it. I kind of started it, then forgot about it, and then picked it up again and finished it in 2 hours. Well, something around that. So it's very good. It's about this girl named Sophia, and it's about like kings and queens because there's a very prevalent theme of this whole town, this kind of town, is kind of cut off from the rest of the world, and it's centered on the Cinderella tale. So all the girls, when they turn 16 or 18 or something like that, have to go to this ball, and they get 3 balls to find a husband before they become like a spinster or something really mean or something like that. I don't know. And they're forced to do this by the king, who follows they have to follow this story, so it's a very imposed kind of monarchy that's forcing all these people to do it. And Sophia is in love with her childhood best friend, who's also in love with her, so it's like, aw, at the start, and you're like, these guys are going to be together forever. Right. But no, they don't. Because her best friend, they have to go to the ball eventually, and she finds someone to get married to, and she's like, oh my god, I'm so lucky, now I won't die a spinster, because it's very ingrained in them that they have to find a husband. And she's like, I don't want to find a husband, we could run away together. And she's like, no, I'm going to marry my husband, fiance, whatever. And then basically she goes off on this whole quest to find out Cinderella, her story, and everything that's going on, and how to free all these people in the town who are following this rule. And it originally starts off as a motive so she and her love can be together, but eventually it just turns into these people are being manipulated into this, and we need to free them because it's not their choice.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
So how long can you remember, Mariam, how long before the Cinderella myth had come into being?
It had been 200 years.
200 years, right.
Yeah, so it's a really good book. Definitely recommend it, Also, it looks really cool, so,
I mean, that front cover is very striking.
I know.
Yeah, it's very striking. And it's a really interesting concept.
It is, yeah.
It's about how myth is perpetrated and things become set in stone.
Isn't there a second one?
There is a second one.
Is there a sequel?
Yeah, it's 3 now.
What?
Did you know this?
No, it's not part of the other series.
It's not part of this Poison Heart.
Hang on, that's not it, is it? No,
And
but
this
there is.
No.
The new one is the sequel, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
No, it's a sequel. It's a sequel to This Poison Heart.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so she's also written some other books called
Yeah,
This
there you
Poison
go.
Heart, which I read over the summer, and it's also very good. And it's got kind of similar themes, sort of magic and gay. So, if you're into that, definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's a really, really good take on it, definitely.
Especially since we're still having new films, we're still having new takes on it as well. But that's really clever. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Marianne.
Right. Next up.
Who's brought stuff, by the way?
Who's brought stuff? Marianne, just sit down.
Yeah, stay sat because you have to swap with someone.
Stay sat, yeah.
Emily? No? Did you bring anything?
Well, the only book I have is Six Crimson Cranes, but I don't know how I'm going to do better than Miss Rio about talking about
Talk about it.
Go on.
Give your point of view if you want to say.
Okay.
There you go. So yeah, now you sit over there. That's how we do this musical chairs thing, yeah?
Yeah, you never end up back in your original chair.
So I read Six Crimson Cranes because of Miss Rio, because of your excellent review on it. And I just found it like it was really gripping, like every single page. But like, it was like about this princess who's like a bit spoilt, very spoilt, and she has a stepmother who is a bit strange, mean, but can be nice sometimes, but who doesn't really like her, and she's about to get married to this random guy from another city, like area from like the same country kind of thing. It's like set in it's fantasy really. And on the day that they're about to get married, she's basically showing signs of magic, and she runs, like her little bird goes to the lake, I think. And then she runs into the lake and then she starts drowning. But then she's saved by a dragon, but she's missed her wedding really, and everyone's like really upset at her, so she has to make like, what's it called, like a blanket kind of thing, forgot what it's called, but she has to make it. She's really bad at making them, but then while making it, she's making it with her stepmother, who she really doesn't like, and she kind of leans in more to her stepmother, and she is like trying to find out why she's so like weird, and she goes into her garden one day, follows her, and basically takes her to a curse. Unluckily, you have to see why, because I kind of think that's a spoiler, but and then she has 6 brothers who are all turned into cranes, 6 crimson cranes, and a bowl is placed on her head, like she can't take it off, and it covers her eyes and her nose, and so no one knows who she is, and if anyone she's not allowed to say who she is, otherwise she's not allowed to speak any word or sound that comes out her mouth. One of her brothers die, so if she makes anything, she tells anyone who she is, one of her brothers will die, and she's not allowed to write it either, because then there's this like voice of her stepmother going like, don't do that, and then otherwise bad things happen to your brothers. And basically it's her trying to find her brothers, but also trying to break this curse, because the curse, like, now all the sons and her have disappeared from the palace, so now like everyone's gone into war because there's no one else to take the throne. So basically it's her trying to find her brothers, but also trying to break the curse with like a sadness, like is this like twist that comes with having to break the curse on her brothers. And just I found it really gripping, but I found like it wasn't even halfway that I was quite surprised that what happened. It's like I didn't think there was going to be like there's like a ton left of the book, and I was like, why is there a ton left? Shouldn't they be saved already? But then you have to read, when you keep reading, you realise it's not just about brothers, there's more to the curse and to the family. Yeah. Oh, and the book was based off loads of different myths, like mythology and stories. And one of them is about the girl with a wooden ball on her head, who, like, her mother, I don't remember it properly, but her mother, this is the story, puts a ball on her head because she's like so beautiful, and then no one like can see her beauty, and one day she gets like married, and like she's sent away to clean and stuff, maybe, I'm not sure, but you gotta read to find out. And then one day she gets married, and on the day she gets married, her bowl breaks off her head, because the guy who married her loves her for her and not for what she looks like. So I quite like that story. Yeah,
there's a lot of things like that. I know that it's a sort of a fantasy, high fantasy, that's based on myths from a particular culture. And what culture was it that the myths come from?
Chinese.
Yes. I seem to. I haven't actually read it, but I remember reading somewhere it's inspired by Chinese. And some of what you were saying is sounded familiar, because I've got a passing familiarity with some Chinese mythology. So so that's really good. And there is
the sequel.
This one there is a sequel to
A
it.
Dragon's Promise.
A Dragon's Promise. That's right. And
And the cover's really pretty. honestly. Yeah,
Good thing.
it's great. It looks great on my bookshelf.
Right.
Of course, always an important consideration. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks.
Good stuff. Juna, I know you said you had two, didn't you? So do you wanna go next?
Just swap.
So the first, I feel really small in this chair.
It's your first time in the hot seat.
Yeah. So one of the first book that I read over the summer holidays was The Queen and I by Sue Townsend, and it's basically about what would happen if a prime minister was elected that basically didn't want to have a monarch. So the prime minister basically just took the royals sort of off the throne, so now they were just these normal people, and it was like how they would cope with living as normal people with like not much money at all, like just like minimum wage, and it's really hilarious because it's just the people's reactions because they've been living in luxury for like their whole life, and then suddenly coming down to see how much you have to actually work for money and luxury from a normal person's perspective. And I also think one of my favourite bits is how the dog turns feral, as if even the dog is influenced by the environment. Because like in the palace it was all like fancy and never bit or growled at anybody, but then suddenly with this like pack of dogs in the neighbourhood, it also goes bad. So I think that was really funny. And then there's sort of like a big plot twist thing at the end, which is, by the end I mean the last page, because I turn over and I was like, well, they just finished the story, so what's on the next page? And then it was just the end, and I was like, okay.
So a shock.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was quite satisfying ending, and also again quite funny. So in the second book, or really books that I read, I was rereading them. Was a series called the Ranger's Apprentice series. They're not really about like royals, but then the book that I was reading is. So it's just about this like group of people called the Rangers who are the protectors of the country called Araluan, and they're like almost like inhuman because they have such skills like the bow and they can move without being seen and things. But it's actually just that they've practiced so much and they have like a camouflage cloak and things, which I thought was like a really interesting concept. And so there's 12 in the series, but then the 11th one is like a collection of stories of like sort of things that the books didn't cover, like how Will, the main character's like father, died, and just things like that. That's not a spoiler. It's said in the first book, so that was not a spoiler at all. So yeah. And then the 12th book is like set in the future. So it's like when Will's like older. So that's not really some of the main books, but I still like them. But the first 10 are the best, I think. So
Quite a series, isn't it?
12 books
Yeah.
is a huge series.
Yeah.
Like Lemony Snicket.
yeah,
It's like 13
have,
books.
I have a whole shelf of them because they fill up. So then the 10th book is called The Emperor of Nihonja, which is like another country, and it's not really royalty, but it's an emperor. So it's about how Horace, who's like a knight, and then George, who's sort of like a scribe / diplomat, are sent to this foreign country to like learn about their ways and how they fight off enemies and things. When so the emperor has a revolt against him from his sort of like closest people, and so they have to like defend the emperor and find this fortress with the Kikori, who are like woods people. So they cut down wood and they supply the wood and timber for the whole kingdom. And so they've got to like find this fabled fortress and like use it against the people who are revolting. And again, it's like nearly fantasy, but it's not, because it's set in like a different world, and there are elements where it could almost be fantasy, but then it all sort of comes back down to the one thing, which is skill. So you're practicing so much that you become almost inhuman at it, which comes up a lot in the books. And yeah.
Seems like a very rich, vivid world that's been
Yes,
built there.
there's a lot of world building, which I really like.
Yeah, which any fan of fantasy would like. Yeah, it sounds fascinating. Does it remind you of anything? Is it
Well, the different countries are definitely based on real countries. Like Araliwan is definitely like medieval England. So this is set like where they don't have like any technology, but it's not really Earth. So Araliwan is definitely like England, and then Hibernia is Ireland, and there's Picta, which is Scotland, and there's just like loads and loads of different countries which you can see are based off of.
European? It's mostly European now, rather than like, there's no ancient Egyptian equivalent. Or
No, but
anything.
there are some, I think, Asian countries as well.
Right, okay.
But yeah, it's just a really, really good sort of read. They're quite satisfying as well. They always end really well. And the ninth book, which is called Holt's Peril, is amazing, and it's also terrifying at the same time, because one of the character that's been with the main character since the first book is about to die, and he's sort of always on the edge of your seat, and I really don't want to read on because he might die, but then I have to read on because he might survive, and it's just terrifying and amazing at the same time.
Sounds like the events of last week.
So yeah, those are the books I read.
All right.
That sounds great, Juno.
Thank you very much, Juno. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Sophie?
Sophie?
Okay. I haven't read this book since I was like 9, so I can't remember much about it. But it's called The Undercover Princess. It's about... Yeah, it was a really good book. It was about two girls, one who was a princess or was going to be crowned queen eventually, and one girl who was like obsessed with fairy tales and loved like the royal family and stuff.
Right.
And the princess wanted to be a normal teenager, and they're like 14, so yeah. And then they both go to boarding school, and they end up in the same room. And they like learn about each other, and they switch. And one of them has to go to all these balls, and she nearly gets killed, but that's another thing. Yeah, I can't really remember much about it, but it's got a really pretty cover.
That's a common theme.
It's like Pink and Galaxy.
Oh, that one.
There's a precedent in this. Mark Twain in the 19th century, he wrote a book called The Prince and the Pauper, and that's when a very ordinary boy switches with Edward VI, or at least who is to be Edward VI, in other words, Henry VIII's son. I'm right, is it Mark Twain?
No, Mark Twain did I was just thinking this.
He did
He did the then modern updating. Prince and the Pauper would have been one of the fairy tales, wouldn't it? From not Hans Christian Andersen.
No,
not him, but
definitely a novel.
It's definitely a novel.
Because they made it.
If it's a novel, it predates Mark Twain, so it's going back a bit.
No, if it's anything, it's post Mark Twain. I think.
This book also has it's a trilogy, and the second one I think it goes back to when they're going before they've gone to school, and in her little cottage with her mum, or I can't remember.
Prince and the Pauper is Mark Twain, and he also did
1881.
And he also did Connecticut.
Yes, he did.
In King Arthur's court.
Which suggests that he's obsessed with English history.
Well, yeah, he is, isn't he?
Yes.
And King Arthur, there you go.
So it's
There's
a trilogy, Sophie, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
I haven't read the third one, but I really want to reread them now.
Yeah.
Because my sister just read them because I gave them to her to borrow.
Right, okay.
Now I really want to read them again.
It's that vice versa. It's
Freaky Friday.
It's a good theme.
Common theme.
Oh, Freaky Friday, there we go, yeah.
There's 3 movies on Netflix about them. The Princess Switch.
Oh my gosh, yes.
A new one comes out every Christmas.
Really?
Yeah.
Every Christmas I watch The Princess Switch, the new one that just came out every Christmas.
It's a common thing. Everyone loves it.
It's a tradition every year to watch it. Really good.
New swaps or just the same or something different?
They swap with their third
More
thing.
character.
Oh, right.
What?
Triple
she's
swap.
She's not really a twin. She's just someone who looks exactly like her.
Okay, to look alike.
Doppelganger,
So she's a twin of one of them, and the other one's not a twin. She's
Oh
different.
yes.
Yeah, the one the
They're
blonde
so
hair.
confusing.
The
The
bad
American who becomes a princess.
It's really confusing.
Yeah, because I've only watched the first one, but she's like a humble baker
Becomes a princess.
who goes to this baking thing.
Yeah.
It's one of those
She's
things
that
And then she has to.
She has to become a princess.
And then she has to go ride horses with the prince, and she can't move.
Oh,
It's
how
really
awful
bad.
for her.
And she feels
And
It's
in the
a bit
second one,
funny.
oh, but the third one's great. The third one's one of my favourite because it's more about the third evil twin.
Third evil twin.
Yeah, it's really it's
You
really
get, I think you get a lot of
confusing.
mileage out of these.
I can't tell which one's which.
Swap ones.
I can't
'cause
tell which one's which. There's like
Everyone
too many.
loves that movie with what's her face, Lindsay Lohan, The Parent Trap. Yeah,
I
everyone.
love that.
It's universally adored, that
The
one.
Frontiers and
So
Yeah,
yes,
we
I
know
know.
as well.
I know all too well. I remember from last year.
When we watched it, at the
Yeah, I did watch it. I hated
like
the
the
other
mini
bits. I
fan
did
that
have to watch
just
it.
kept going on and on.
So yeah, there you go. So it's a very appealing idea.
Also, the boarding school they go to is like very infamous. It's very suspicious. It's a bit weird. But you know.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
I'll
intrigued
drink it.
then.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, Sophie. Does anyone want more tea? Now is a good time, I would say.
My
It's
tea's still
opportune
over
moment. Who wants more tea? Seeing as I
Me, please.
did go all the way up to the staff room to brew a fresh pot, so I would like all people to have more of that if possible.
There's a seat there, Sophie. Just sit there.
Anybody else? Dave,
I
you gonna-
think Jason's got a couple. Oh, sorry. For,
Just like that with one sugar, please.
Jason, you can go in and sit ready if you want. Make yourself comfortable.
I'm sure you can think of something.
No, I've got something.
Oh, you have. Okay.
Tea break.
Oh, so pretty.
yeah.
So what have you got? Holly Black. Oh, the Iron. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Excellent.
Ironwood good? Because I'm really gonna read it.
Borrow it. Borrow it.
No one's borrowed it yet in the library.
Yeah. Well, it's quite new. We only got it sort of. It was only published Easter, something like that, was it? Yeah. Back then, so it's still quite new.
I was too old. Oh, I have Cinderella.
Where are the bears?
My sister loves it.
This Rio, the bears still behind the
Yeah,
counter.
that's what we were saying. They have.
They just re-
Oh, they must be.
No.
They're just having a little sleep.
By the time they woke up.
We said we should do a.
Anyone else want some tea?
Order?
So you guys like being the florist.
So happy.
There they are.
Here they are.
How could we forget?
So I'm not going to. You can hold them if you want to, but I'm going to put them here. Emily, Pooh Bear,
Paddington.
Paddington.
That's basically it.
I recently found like a book
Yes.
of all of them.
All the Paddington tales.
Maybe not.
I had them on VHS.
Yeah. They are brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's the first thing we've done. Well, I just felt like we got a whole pot there, and some people said they might want a second one. So. Right, so thank you for waiting, Josie, so patiently. Over to you.
So the first book I want to talk about is The Wicked King, which is the sequel to The Cruel Prince, if anyone's read that, and it's set in a fantasy world, and it mainly centres around one girl who is, her and her twin sister originally lived in the normal world, but her half-sister, it turns out, is half fairy, which basically...
Is that bad news?
It is quite bad news. So her actual father, her half-sister's father comes back and kills her actual parents, and they're all taken to the fairy world, despite her and her twin sister being human. So it's kind of the story of her and trying to fit in, but also being quite confrontational with one of the characters of the prince, who then becomes king. But Yeah, and so I'd recommend reading that if you're any fan of fantasy generally.
Also fairy, because it's a motif. The changeling motif is ancient. It's really ancient. In Midsummer Night's Dream, those of you who study it in Year 7, Titania has a little changeling boy, which they're fighting. She's fighting over with Oberon, and then there are innumerable legends as well about changelings, people going to fairyland and then having to be rescued, etc. Marianne.
The term changeling was actually kind of used for children who were like misbehaved, or often autistic children who were kind of, they were seen as, oh my god, they're so different, they must be fairies.
Sorry, go on.
And then the second book, which, although it's not strictly a king or a queen, it is based on the only female emperor of China, so it's a sci-fi kind of retelling of that, but it also has mythological elements to it, and it centers around this girl who there's basically these big machines which are piloted by people's inner spirit, their yin or yang, according to if they're a girl or a boy, and the boys are seen as superior, so a lot of the girls end up dying in these piloting these machines, and it centers around this girl who a couple of months earlier, sister has died in one of these machines, and she signs up to end up piloting with the boy who killed her sister, and she goes in an attempt to try and kill him to get revenge on him killing her sister.
Yeah, and that's interesting about you said the machines piloted by your yin or your yang. Yeah, that's like the Taoism thing, isn't it? Which is a big part of Chinese philosophy, essentially. So that's interesting. Is it? Yeah, of course. There we go, Miss Huntley. That's the one that Miss Huntley tries to get into every Litsock. There's something else that we try to get in Litsock. That's Miss Huntley's one. No, but yeah, that sounds really.
The other bête noire that we hardly mentioned, there aren't any.
No, there isn't.
No.
Not that I can think of.
No.
I don't think we need to say out loud, do we? No. What it is. Maybe I think some of those who've joined us this year don't know what we're talking about.
No.
Harry Potter.
Are there? No.
Can anyone think of any monarchs?
No. I was thinking about that because I can always talk about Harry Potter.
Same.
Yeah, there you go. See, that's why it always gets mentioned in every Litsock.
Yeah.
I think Miss Huntley's going to make her mission to beat it to the punch with an Ursula Le Guin reference in each Litsock.
After 10 years, it's Harry Potter's also ran. It'll now.
Last week,
Litsock bingo.
made the first reference to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Did you?
She did actually. Well remembered. Yes.
Because I didn't want to ruin it. Yeah.
Oh no, it's right. It's fine. It's happened now.
Weren't we celebrating a few years for Harry Potter or something? That's why the new 50p came out with Harry Potter's face on it. About that in Good News Wednesday.
Huh? When did that?
Oh, that was on Good News Wednesday in Year 9.
Yeah.
Year 9 form time where you had that.
We have Good News Wednesday, and it's new because we're celebrating 12 years.
I've seen the Peter Rabbit one.
And no, there's one that now, if you put a UV light on it, a lightning bolt comes up. No, it's 25 years and 25 on the side of the coin, and it's Harry Potter's face. You can't spend it because it's in colour, because they've coloured a bit of it as well.
Oh, so is this
a collector?
Peculiar collector.
Yeah, and they've looked at also making a Dumbledore one.
A Voldemort one.
I would buy a
and
Voldemort
one. But they're not making any of the other characters.
Oh right.
More important than Harry.
Anyway, that there you go. That has very little to do with what Josie just talked about, but that's how it goes.
Have you read them recently?
Yeah, I've read both of them recently.
Over the summer, or just?
I read Iron Widow over the summer, and I read The Wicked King just before the summer holidays.
Yeah, they're both quite new, especially Iron Widow. Yeah. I mean, Holly Black. That's a sequel. That was 2 or 3 years ago. I think the first one came out, or something like that. And of course, yeah, we've got plenty of books by here. So, and hopefully we get more from Ziran Jay Zhao. My pronunciation should be better. But brilliant, yeah. Thank you, Josie. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Anybody else?
Lulu has now grabbed some stuff. Ah.
I'm going to introduce you to some culture. This is the Lady Grace mystery books.
I remember those.
And you can see by... it's very popular, or at least it used to be. But I realised when I went and looked for it that they must have been like the original Murder Most Unladylike books, because the covers are not similar, but they're like all the same, and it makes me really happy.
Okay, just explain, because the camera is a way away. Just explain what they are. Lady Grace.
These are the Lady Grace mysteries by Grace Cavendish, who's the main character. And the cool thing is that they're all named alphabetically. So this one's Assassin, this one's Betrayal, and this one's Conspiracy. And they're all different colours. It's very cute. Anyway, but I was obsessed with these books when I was younger. And I had a very flimsy paperback edition, and it was one of the books that I would read over and over and over and over again, and I basically knew it off by heart, but I really liked it. I'll just say a few things I particularly liked, because I was really into history, and I still am. I was a big Horrible Histories geek. I was listening to the songs on my way to the train the other day, and it was a very, very happy moment. But yeah, this was kind of my first introduction to historical fiction, like, especially in like the diary kind of form. I always really like reading books in a diary, and this is what this is. So the first thing I remember I really liked was that it said the 13th day of February in the year of our Lord 1569. I was obsessed with the fact that it said in the year of our Lord, and I would like say that as well. It was really cringy, but I would be like, this is 2010, the year of our Lord. And I just loved the character of Lady Grace. She was so sassy, and she just spoke back to everyone. She didn't care what people thought, and I just thought that was an amazing person to be. The other thing I remember I really liked was, I should say it's relevant because it's got Queen Elizabeth I as a monarch, and it's super cool because she's an actual character. So I feel like in a lot of historical fiction, it's like, the Queen is in the corner over there, but she doesn't have any lines and she doesn't say anything. But in this, she has a personality, and she's very fiery, very vivacious, kind of like Lady Grace. So they're kind of, because Lady Grace is an orphan, it's kind of like a mother-daughter relationship. That's why it's relevant to this. But the like kind of inciting incident of this novel is the fact that Elizabeth is trying to get Lady Grace married, and I was obsessed with that scene as well. I won't say why, but basically she has to choose. It's very romantic. She has to choose between 3 objects for these 3 suitors, and it's like a knife, a purse, and like a handbag or something. But I was obsessed with it. I can try and find it and read it.
There's a Merchant of Venice in it then.
Yeah. So yeah, it says, this is Elizabeth. She caught my hand and raised me up. Each of Lady Grace's lovers has presented a gift, unmarked and unknown. Now it is for Lady Grace to select the gift that likes her heart best, and so the man that will have her heart. My heart went thump lurch, and I wanted to be sick, which obviously I couldn't, standing next to the Queen like that. Come, my dear, make appraisal of the gifts, the Queen commanded, and then she looks at all of the gifts. And then I forgot about this. This is very fun for me. She does this like sassy monologue, and it's like, may I explain what I judge from these gifts, Your Majesty? And then she said, this flask, Your Majesty, is beautifully made for bringing spirits to revive one's spirits when hunting. Perhaps Sir Charles, who has been helping my poor horsemanship, is hoping I will need it soon. From this, I guess a great ability to love, a heart deep enough for anyone to drain, a generous and kindly nature. But I fear it will be a long time before I can ride well enough to keep up with the Queen's hunt. So yeah, all those sassy little remarks like that, I just really enjoyed. But yeah, that's why I like those.
Thank you very much, Lulu. I haven't heard about those for a long time.
Yeah, no, my good.
Read them.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else?
Sienna, excellent.
So I'm gonna talk about something that I haven't before. I'm going to tell you what the summary of the story is, and then I'll talk about it. So it's about 2 immortals who have one is a representation of war, one is a representation of death. they both like travel the world for quite a while. They're like really good friends. One of them disappears for a while, and the other one doesn't know where he's gone. Time passes. Eventually, they reunite again, and one of them's built a kingdom and has 2 sons who are princes. Things happen. It's very cute. It's very sweet because they become like a little family, and until tragedy, the mother dies, and the one of them has to leave somewhere, and the other one stays behind and basically helps the princes like grow up and take care of the kingdom. The older one becomes king at the age of 16, and then has to like rule over the kingdom because his father's just left in the middle of the night, which isn't great. And then time passes and the princes are grown up, and then there's a war and they have to fight that, having no prior experience. The princes are like 15 and 20 something, so they don't really know what they're doing. And then their brother, who is immortal, tries to help them, and the war happens and the father comes back and things happen. It's a tragedy, but it's very, very sweet, and it's a fan fiction that is the length of a novel, and it's a Dream SMP fan fiction, so Minecraft.
I can see why you did it this way around.
Yeah.
Not what you'd expect.
Yeah. It's hard to explain the plot without giving that away.
Yeah.
But you can read it without knowing any of the characters. It, like, people have bound it so that it's like a physical book.
Like all the young dudes.
Yes, like all the young dudes. It's called Passerine. It's really good. I recommend all of you to read it. It's on AO3. So.
Thank you, Sienna.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well done.
And also the selection, but I read that when I was young. I loved it then. I can't read it now. I tried to read it last summer and just thought it was not as good as I remembered.
Yeah, but
Sometimes that happens.
It might work. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Time is.
Mr. Humphries,
I can do 1 minute. I'll be quick.
Come on.
Okay. Right, Philip Reeve. You all heard of Philip Reeve? Mortal Engines, yes. Now, are you aware that he wrote a King Arthur book, Here Lies Arthur, back in 2008, and it won a Carnegie Medal? Are you aware of that? No. There we go then. So, this book is, as it suggests, about King Arthur. It's a bit reminiscent of when you were talking about earlier, Marianne, in the sense that it's the King Arthur in this book. He's a bit of an idiot, essentially, and he in this version, Merlin is not a wizard; he's a bard, which is a storyteller, and he's all about constructing a suitable mythology about it. You know, getting the legend of Arthur, because he wants to unite the Britons against the invading Saxons, and it's told from the point of view of a slave girl who actually survives a raid by Arthur and his men. Massacre the village, and she escapes. And he basically turns her into his little mole, if you like, his little spy, to get close to Arthur, and then work his words and magic to get him to be a legendary figure. So it deconstructs the Arthurian legend, and very cleverly. Very much worth the read. So if you like Philip Reeve, which I could tell when I asked you, a lot of you do, you should definitely look at this, because this is probably overlooked a little bit in his canon. So yeah. Here Lies Arthur, Philip Reeve. Thank you very much.
And I will follow that up with an earlier version of the myth. Aha. Okay. Mad met my eyes. Will the new king ride this way, then? He may, I smiled. How soon did you hear? One of our people came from the town to tell us. He showed a gap of broken teeth. Not by the gates you locked, master, but we knew before that. Did you not see the shooting star? He went across the heavens from end to end, crested like a dragon and riding a trail of smoke. So we knew you would come, but we were up beyond the Wolves' Road when the fire drake ran, and we were almost too late. I am sorry. You came in time, I said. I'm in your debt for my life. I shan't forget it. I was in yours, he said. Why did you ride alone? You should have known there was danger. I knew there was death, but I wanted no more death on my hands. Pain is another thing, and is soon over. I got to my feet stiffly. If I'm never to move again, Mab, I must move now. My clothes? Mab is an old one. He lives in the hills. He goes, and he's talking to Merlin, who is, of course, the person who looks after Arthur. So Arthur comes to be crowned and king. Take up the sword, he who dares. Movement and men's voices full of dread. Then Cador, that is the sword, I would know it anywhere. I saw it in his hand full of light. It is hid. God witness it. I would not touch it if Merlin himself bade me. There were cries of, nor I, nor I. And then, let the king take it up. Let the high king show us Maxon's sword. Arthur came slowly forward. Behind him the place was dim. The crowd shrunk back into darkness, the shuffle and murmur of their presence no more than the breeze in the forest trees outside. Here between us the white light blazed and the blade shivered. The darkness flashed and sparkled, a crystal cave of vision, crowded and whirling with bright images. A white stag collared with gold, a shooting star dragon-shaped and trailing fire, a king restless and desirous with a dragon of red gold shimmering on the wall behind him. A woman, white-robed and queenly, and behind her in the shadows a sword standing in an altar like a cross. A circle of vast linked stones standing on a windy plain with a king's grave at its centre. A child handed into my arms on a winter night, a grail shrouded in mouldering cloth, hidden in a dark vault. A young king crowned. Come, I said gently, it is yours. He put his hand through the white blaze of fire, and the hilt slid cool into the grip for which 100 years before it had been made. And they leave. Merlin is left in the chapel. I swept and cleaned the place and made it fair again. I moved slowly like an old man. I still remember how my body ached and how at length, when I knelt again, my sight blurred and darkened, as if still blind with vision or with tears. The tears showed me the altar now, bare of the ninefold light that had pleasured the old, small gods, bare of the soldier's sword and the name of the soldier's god. All it held now was the hilt of the carved sword, standing in the stone like a cross, and the letters still deep and distinct above it, to him unconquered. And that's The Legend of Arthur by Mary Stewart in the Hollow Hills.
Also a trilogy.
Also a trilogy. In fact, actually a quartet as well.
Quartet.
The Wicked Day. Yes.
Right. Okay. That's
The
very
Once and
beautifully written.
Future King.
Beautifully written.
Yes, beautifully written, and I'm sure Philip Reeves is too.
Well, yeah. So that's more magical. This is more.
Yeah.
You know.
So we have a new king, and on
We
Monday
do.
will be the funeral. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, and see you all next week.